patient after patient after patient that was suffering from drug-resistant tuberculosis. I told you a little bit about it earlier. And these are people with tuberculosis in which the tuberculosis bacterium is resistant to the most powerful drugs, right? So the World Health Organization had officially declared that they're not treatable. And so they literally, World Health Organization had declared a death sentence on every person in a poor country that suffered from this disease. So we thought, hey, this is our chance. Maybe we can do something on a much bigger level. So we started treating the patients. That's when we had to borrow $100,000 worth of drugs from Brigham and Women's Hospital. And we started having success. These patients that they said were uncurable, we started getting cures, and we reached 85% cure.
와, 선구자시네.
So this group of patients that WHO had said are untreatable, the Pan American Health Organization, the World Health Organization both said, do not treat them. Do not treat them because they're untreatable. They said the drugs are too expensive. You cannot treat MDR-TB. What are you accusing us of? So it was a fight. We had to fight. So we did everything from lowering the drug prices. So doing a few quick things that I'd learned from being in Korea studying the Yakuks. And we lowered the drug prices for the MDR-TB. We lowered the price of the drugs by 90%. We started, and we treated 50 cases in one town of 100,000 people. That ended up changing the world.
We have a clip to play for you.
Fue una lucha en la que fue bien dura. Que
That's milky
tanto de personas que realmente estuvieron ahí.
This is what a transformation, my God. To think we almost let him die.
That was so interesting. We thought, oh my God, this tiny group of people in this tiny organization, we can change the world. So I never stopped doing that. All the other titles were temporary, but that has stayed with me until today. And so just like MDR-TB, there was an issue that was boiling over, and that was treating HIV in developing countries. So this is Joseph Jun. He was about his mid-20s at the time, from an extremely poor part of Haiti. He came to the clinic suffering from both tuberculosis and HIV. But we had gotten donations of antiretroviral drugs, of anti-HIV drugs. And so we started treating him. In a period of about 3 months, this is what he looked like.
와, 헬시해졌어. 건강해졌어.
So we call this the Lazarus effect of HIV treatment. And the people who were actually living with HIV were mostly in Africa. 25 million people living with HIV in Africa. And we almost couldn't believe it because the HIV doctors were saying exactly the same thing as the TB doctors. It's not possible, it's crazy, the drugs are too expensive, don't even think about treating HIV in developing countries. Once again, they were saying the drugs are too expensive, and at that time, the drugs cost $12,000 per person per year. But that's because they were on patent. And again, I had studied the pharmaceutical industry, so I knew that we could get them off patent, right? We could, and so the argument I made was, so the pharmaceutical industry only makes 1% of its profit in Africa, right? So why are you stopping us from making generic versions of these drugs? Why are you stopping us from doing that? And so they literally wanted to get me fired because I was trying to break patents. And I said, no, I'm not trying to break patents. I just want to figure out a way that we can get the same drugs in generic version to Africa because 25 million people are dying. So Paul Farmer, who I told you about, took those before and after pictures to the White House. took them to the White House, showed them to George W. Bush's top aides, and that evening, January 28, 2003, George Bush announced, partly based on seeing Joseph Jun's pictures, that he was going to treat HIV.
I asked the Congress to commit $15 billion over the next 5 years, including nearly $10 billion in new money, to turn the tide against AIDS in the most afflicted nations of Africa and the Caribbean.
Now, so interesting, I became head of the HIV department, and I set a goal. When we started at WHO in July of 2003, there were about 100,000 people in the world in developing countries getting care. So I said, let's just change the game. Let's treat 3 million people by 2005. So 2.5 years, 3 million people, that's almost impossible because we had to bring the drug prices down. And guess what? We brought the prices from $12,000 per person per year to $70 per person per year. So that eventually the US, but all the other countries, bought these drugs for $70 per person per year. Today, 27 million people in Africa are on treatment. You don't know if something's going to happen. When we were running Partners in Health, we were working in Haiti and Peru and Mexico, some very poor communities. One student asked me, so I think you guys are crazy. You go into these incredibly difficult situations and you always talk about how optimistic you are, right? And it just doesn't make any sense. Because I go there and I don't feel optimistic when I see these situations of great poverty. And so at that moment, just sort of off the top of my head, if you go into these very poor situations and walk around saying, oh God, you can't do anything here, they're so, they're in such bad shape, there's nothing we can do. If that's your attitude, that's the outcome.
우울증.
So 36.8% of people in Korea are thought to be depressed. So there's been tremendous growth, as we know, but this is really disturbing. Highest expected rate of depression in the entire OECD. So what's to blame? So Jonathan Haidt says that the front-facing camera, because of social media, and high-speed internet access, if you put those together, anxiety and depression among young people goes up. So once again, Korea is the highest social media usage. And Korea at 89.3% is about 1.7 times that of other countries. So we know that the use of social media and anxiety and depression are linked, and Korea is one of the most difficult situations in the world. Right? So another thing that you ask, okay, so if 36.8% of all Koreans have depression, how many of them get treated? Only 2% of Korean people get access to antidepressive therapy. So again, this shouldn't surprise us that suicide rates are high. If the highest rate of depression and lowest rate of treatment, there really is the lowest rate of treatment in OECD. Loneliness, we know that so-called 고독사, right? 고독사 is higher in Korea than anywhere else. One of my former students was the Surgeon General, the top doctor in the United States, and he said, if you answer yes on a questionnaire when they ask you, are you lonely? It shortens your life the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So it has a direct effect. Anxiety and loneliness have so much to do with suffering, and it's an entirely treatable phenomenon. And the only way to fix it is for the Korean people to demand that it gets fixed. Right? In the US, you see a lot of celebrities talking about depression. You know, Dwayne Johnson said depression doesn't discriminate, it affects everybody. Lady Gaga also said that she suffered from depression her entire life, founded a nonprofit. The British actress Emma Thompson also said depression is really common, it's something that we should all think about. And I had the great good fortune of meeting the BTS guys. And I was on a panel with them at the UN, and RM gave a beautiful speech about how people should love themselves.
I have come to love myself for who I am, for who I was, and for who I hope to become. What is your name? Speak yourself. Thank you very much.
It wasn't specifically about depression, not specifically about suicide, but it was wonderful. So there's the possibility that we can talk about this more effectively.